Welcome to another episode of Borderless Diaries, the podcast. It is the international podcast where we're going to discuss what it's like to have your life abroad in a different country, living internationally, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. Her name is Kent. She is originally from South Africa and now lives in Ireland, where she's not only built a strong career, but also a sense of home. She used to be my housemate in Ireland, and we lived together in Dublin for quite a while. I think about 2 years. And I will say she is one of my biggest supporter. I'm one of her biggest supporter. And I really, really am keen to have her here on the podcast where we're going to discuss everything, what it's like to build your support system in a different country, what that's like, and what her learnings were throughout that process. So, without further ado, let's dive in and let's give her a call. Welcome, Ken, to Borderless Diaries. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, me too. It's a nice way to catch up as well, but also kind of like delving deeper into our story, which is going to be fun.
So I've been thinking about it, and yeah, thinking it's going to be a nice way for me to reflect as well.
Yeah, that's good. So, Kent, every guest starts with the same question. What's the most unforgettable, funny, or downright awkward experience you've had while adjusting to a new life in a new country?
I think it's probably like not one thing, but it's now that I'm more used to living in Ireland and I've picked up a lot of Irish slang, but still got my South African accent. So sometimes I'll be using Irish slang to an Irish person, like, that little girl's a wee devil, isn't she? And they won't understand what I'm saying because I've still got my South African accent, and they get me to repeat and repeat like what I've said, and instead of making me sound more like a local, it makes me sound like completely foreign. So this keeps happening, and I'm not noticing it because I'm not noticing when I use the slang because I've been here for 8 years now. Yeah, people are, like, confused. They're like, "What is she?"
What do people mostly like? Do they recognize your accent from being from South Africa?
When I first arrived to Ireland, very strangely, most people thought I was British, so both Irish and, in fact, Dutch people. So one of our friends, Dennis, who I believe has been on the podcast, also thought I was British, and like often people who aren't first language English speakers do. I found it surprising that Irish people did, because mostly people in England would be like, "Oh, are you Aussie or are you Kiwi?" Although there's so many South Africans now in England that they can kind of recognize the accent. Um, but every now and then someone recognizes that I'm South African and I feel
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like if I were going blindly, I would probably be like South African or Aussie as well, which is strange because when I was living in Australia, they have a very different type of accent as well, which
I
is
even get confused now. When
yeah,
I hear an Aussie or a New Zealand accent, I take a
yeah,
minute and I'm like, "Are they South African?"
all
And
right,
then
yeah,
I
yeah,
realize what's going
right.
on. I shouldn't be admitting that.
So, Kent, you moved to Ireland about 8 years ago now. Do you remember when you first came to Ireland? What it was?
It's a weird one for me, this topic, because I've got a friend who recently, in the past 3 years, moved to the UK, and she was kind of asking me, like, how did I make the decision to move to Ireland? Like, how did I say goodbye, goodbyes? For me, I got a scholarship
Yeah,
to live, study. The scholarship also gave me money to, like, feed myself, etc. So I got a scholarship to do my master's degree in Ireland. And that was just, I was like, okay, I'll be there for a year.
yeah,
And I'll have this amazing opportunity to study overseas. And then at the end of my master's degree, I'm not going to have a whole conversation about passports, but basically, because I was on a South African passport, you can't just carry on living in Ireland. You need some kind of visa. But if you've done a master's degree in Ireland, you get a kind of 2 years to look for a job and work on a like kind of postmaster's work visa and get a company to sponsor you.
Yeah.
So my IT lecturer, I'd never looked at IT before in the past. I had come from selling art in the Caribbean. She had suggested to me that I'd be a really good fit for an IT company. Still didn't know. I went home to South Africa, wasn't sure if I was going to be there for a week or for the rest of my life. And my mum was like, just go back to Ireland, like, you know, see what it's like to work in another country, give it a chance. Yeah, and in a way, the rest is history. So I think what I'm trying to communicate here and answer to your question is I never kind of consciously was like, oh, I am immigrating to Ireland. It became a decision that I became more and more, or a place that I became more and more invested in the longer I stayed. And that's to say, like, how did I find Ireland? Like, yeah, like I had major culture shock, which I didn't expect because, like, we all
Yeah.
speak English and,
Yeah.
like, both former British colonies. Like,
Yeah.
there must be similarities. But,
Yeah.
yeah, there were just things like South Africans like the Dutch, which I think is part of why we made friends, like, get straight to the point, really direct. And I just had to get used to this thing of Irish people often saying one thing, but meaning another thing, or not saying a thing, but me having to interpret what that silence meant. So, yeah, I think in the beginning I really found it hard understand what was going on in social situations. Like, at least I understood when we were all joking, like, because we've got a similar kind of, like sharp-witted humor, although the Irish are darker. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does answer the question because I think every journey is like so personal, right? And how you get in. And a lot of us, I think, are not like, oh, I'm going to move there and I'm going to make this a success and I'm going to do this. It's often come from kind of like an opportunity and just taking a little bit of a leap of faith and then see how it will turn out. But I think if I reflect a little bit on my own journey as well, it's if you get that opportunity and you're living through that, it kind of sparks that idea of like, oh, I really like to have like learning in a different culture. And what does this mean? And it takes a long time to establish kind of like that home front as well, which I think it's just very unique once you've taken the leap of faith and just take the opportunity landing in a country. And like you said, I did recognize the directness, which I think as well, like it made us communicate super well because we both knew kind of like, oh, this is what you like, this is what you don't like. Oh, this is my feedback, that is your feedback. And for some reason, that yeah, that just works
Yeah,
super
I
well.
think we knew where we stood, and certainly for me, like, I'll always say to people, I'm like, my friends for the first 3 years of living in Ireland were Dutch people.
Yeah.
That is where I found, like, the most common ground, and I felt the safest to kind
Yeah.
of be my South African self now. Like, I've developed and changed a bit, but yeah, certainly, I think we recognize each other's directness. But just going back to the point you said about establishing a home front, like, that does take a while, and I think you and I got to know each other in, like, my 2nd or 3rd year in Ireland, um, which was at a stage that I was really, like, lacking a home front and maybe it did help that we were both kind of quite direct people because I was like, you know what? I can just see if this girl wants to live with me. Like, either she'll say yes or no, and I won't care if she says no. And as it happened, you had a whole plan up your
Yeah.
sleeve.
Oh gosh. And I think it's one of the most funny stories, but it was such a remarkable like start of our friendship as well because and we've talked about this obviously, but we were both kind of like in that moment of okay, what is that support system? What do I like? Who are the people that I like? beyond kind of like a work front, right? Because in Ireland, you're all kind of like on this, it's almost like a campus feeling of, hey, your work colleagues are now also your friends, and you needed to kind of pick out who are people that you want to see outside of work. And I think for me, that first year, I was really struggling through, okay, what does that mean? What are the relationships that I'm looking for and friendships that are really a supportive relationship? And I remember very clearly, and it was kind of a rainy day as well, where you were like, hey, do you want to go to yoga with me? And I was like, yeah, why not? And we were talking a little bit like, hey, yeah, how is your situation? What's my situation? And I remember that we were kind of like, oh, my housing situation is not the best. Maybe I should like reconsider certain things. And then my house opened up and I was like, okay, let me. And you asked as well, like, hey, you want to live with me and be my housemate? And then I was trying to sell you basically the apartment that we were living in.
Well, firstly, I'd given you a vital piece of information about the house I was living on in at the time, which was that they didn't let me turn the heating on. So I'd given you that piece of information and you had said to me, "You can turn the heating on whenever you like." So the saleswoman you had already like,
Yeah, that's true.
said that.
That's true. Yeah.
And then yeah, and then you invited me to come look at the place, and I know we often joke about this, but for the listeners, it was this beautiful penthouse, like very unusual to find in a place like Ireland with like floor to ceiling windows, just space, really beautiful space and light. But when Simone was living in it at the time, there wasn't so much love that was put into it, not by fault of your own, but because of, yeah, people who didn't think you needed to put love into a house. So Simone showed it to me, told me we could put this thing on whenever we wanted. So I was really, you know, almost convinced. And then she said to me afterwards, she sent me a text saying, I know it didn't look like much now, but just think of the space, think of the potential, think of that corner of the living room where we could have like yoga mats and do our yoga together every morning and some beautiful house plants. And I have to say, like, if you weren't in technology, you should be in real estate because you
Yeah.
really sold the vision to me.
I did. And the funny thing is as well, we actually did what we were saying that we would do because ultimately I think it was even the same day or the day after that you were like, yes, I will go for it. And
Yeah.
then I remember how quickly already we turned it into a home. And that I think was really the start of not only our friendship, but really that it's almost like an accountability partner that we found in
Yes.
each other and that support system of, okay, we are both abroad, but we are making this our home. And we had so many plants, and we actually did do the yoga on the floor in the corner
With
as
our
well.
huge projector against the white wall.
That was so lovely. And even so, for the listeners, this was all the start as well of COVID. So, out of kind of like, I think we had maybe 3 months of living together, and then COVID started
Like
somewhere
two and
around
a
that
half
time.
months because I moved
Oh,
in January when I got back
yeah. Yeah.
from holiday.
And that was March 10th that COVID
Yeah.
started, or at least the lockdown started. And then we needed to figure out, okay, is this going to be 2 weeks? And you know, year 2 years later, we were like,
It was
how
Midsummer.
my gosh, and we did. I'm so proud of us how we managed that because we were at the start of a friendship. We're in the start of like being each other's housemates and we just managed it beautifully. And I still to
Mhm.
this day, I'm kind of like Friday evening is pizza night and
Still the
national
same in my house with my partner now.
and
It's
so
what we do for Friday evening. And I think you're right, like, we really did manage it beautifully, and I think, like, we also often speak about this, but we managed for that entire COVID period to support each other, boost each other's confidence, help each other make, like, healthy relationship choices. Simone, I remember, like, you saw me looking relaxed and happy
yeah,
outside
yeah.
of the relationships, and you were like, "Wow, you just look like a win." lifted over your shoulder, and I think in a weird way, we became each other's primary relationship.
100%.
And it was so nice. We often used to speak about it like, this is an example of like what a really healthy relationship looks like. Like we communicate well together, we make jokes when we piss each other off, we tell each other.
Exactly. And coming back to kind of like how did you manage that like culturally? Because we had found similarities in our culture
Yeah.
and the way that we communicate, I think was really good because that meant that we, especially during a time where we were on a full lockdown, people like we were in
Yeah.
that house for 7. And I don't think people realized like the lockdown was quite seriously back then. And it was kind of like, okay, we have just one household. And we made it so good that in the end we called each other housewives as well because it was kind of like that relationship that we were building. And
I think I learned a lot of things about being in a relationship, even though we weren't in a romantic relationship. That helped me, like now that I am in a romantic relationship, living with someone, like I learned about the vision of tasks for household and like living
yeah,
with someone day in, day out. And
100%.
you know,
Because it was a, a huge thing for us in the start of our friendship. Like, how are you gonna do that? And I think we naturally became as well the part in that household because, I was the cook and you were basically like, okay, I will make everything neat and but also to see each other's like you said, like, "Hey, I see that you're relaxed right now," or, "Hey, I see that you're stressed right now. What are triggers?" And we could communicate super well to go a little bit deeper into, "Hey, what is making
yeah,
you feel that way?" Or, "Hey, I'm thinking or I have this idea for my career or for relationships," or whatever that was. We could take a moment to really sit down together and have that conversation, which was
yeah,
so rare and still is quite rare in new type of friendships. And in some way, I think COVID was very good for our friendship because we had that time to have that reflection together and really talk through what making a home or a friendship abroad could be like and what you need from a
yeah,
support system. So I'm forever grateful that I had that experience with you, but also that learning opportunity that we both found in kind of that time frame. Speaking about kind of like that home support system, how did you manage to get kind of like that support system in Ireland? And how is that compared to back home in
I
South
want to
Africa?
say something soppy now, but I think what we built together in the home we lived in and having your support enabled me to then build a broader support network in Ireland so that I didn't feel like completely stranded when you move to the States and give people just a clear idea of what I mean there. So like we'd built a really stable, happy home together. We really kind of supported each other. Um, and then during COVID, all the pools closed. I'm a swimmer, like I was starting to lose my mind from not being able to swim. So I randomly commented on someone who's now a very good friend of mine's Instagram post. I didn't know you from Arthur. I was like, "Oh, that's cool that you swam in South Africa." Random Irish person, I'm South African and I'm a swimmer too. And she invited me to go for a swim with her. But the reason why I say that our home gave me that base is I think like I had the confidence then to put myself forward to like another group of people. I knew I had like, like comfort and a safe happy home to come home to. But most importantly, I had you cheering me on. Like, well, this is amazing. You're now going open water swimming, but don't push yourself too hard. I know I'm not an open water swimmer, but if I were, this is how I take it. And I just had you cheering me on in the background,
Yeah.
as you did with everything, like in my career as well. And I think that's something we did for each other. Yeah, so I had to wait long to find that opportunity to build an Irish network. And it was through this friend of mine, Dee, if you're listening, that she kind of blew open this world of open water swimmers to me and introduced me to all these like-minded people. Um, but I had you supporting me in the background. like telling me to go for it. So, it was a combination of having waited, like, and settled myself, and that took 4 years. So I would say to people who are moving, don't panic about making friends with people in a long-term friendship way in your first few years. Like, that will probably take time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really like the swimming, and I mean, I preach myself almost as your swimming coach without having any knowledge about swimming.
You were dead right with all the advice you gave me.
I was like, you can do this, but be careful with this. And, I was also vested into what make you happy and how can I support you. And you did the same for me as well. And put me out of my comfort zone, but also to make healthier decisions. Because I remember, even with the yoga, you had really felt like, hey, I think this can be good for you because you're stressed right now. Like, give it a try. And I think just to cheer each other on for trying new things, to go out there because you have a safe space to talk about, like, oh, maybe this wasn't my thing, or hey, I'm struggling with this, I can't do this. And because you cheer each other on and find that support in each other, I think it's really important to find that, but also to really embrace that
Yeah.
because it will take you a long time. And even if I reflect on my journey, when I moved away from the United States and even up until the day of today, I struggle with finding that home because we did that so well. And I know you know that as well, where I'm like, maybe I should go back to Ireland because that was my home and that was my support system being abroad. And I think it's really important. You need to go through kind of that uncomfortableness to find that established friend group or relationships or the hobbies that you will do. But also, it's okay to be a little bit lonely in the beginning to find kind of that your way in a new country almost. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's something I I even remember when I first joined Microsoft, like, 'cause you were saying you have to kind of pick, like, who are the kinds of people I wanna be friends with, and I could already see, like, some things weren't necessarily gonna work for me, but because everyone was in such a mindset of like, "Oh, we need to socialize all the time and do all of this," they looked at me a little bit strangely, like, "Well, why aren't you, like, making yourself part of the expat community?" But it's the kind of, even though when someone questions you in that moment, to trust yourself and go, "Yeah, I think what kind of friends I need," and for me, one of the things I found in our friendship was that, yeah, I really need a friend. She like cheers me on and who I know, like, whatever achievements I make, they'll be super, super proud of me and happy like that I did that and vice versa, like me for them. But also whatever goals either of us have, we'll be able to talk to each other about them and keep like putting the energy in. Like, you can achieve anything you want.
Yeah, my gosh, we even wrote things down. So, like, okay, this is a goal that you want to have. How can we get there? And I think it's really important. And one aspect that I want to call out as well is it's okay to go through things and be like, oh, you know what? It didn't work out for me. Or I'm
Mhm.
gonna try this social group. And if you feel like this is not the right match, that's okay. Then
Yeah.
stop doing that. Like you will feel in your bones or your gut feeling or whatever you want to call it, if that is a match or isn't a match. And I think
Mhm.
we all kind of need to embrace that a little bit more because otherwise you create this kind of maybe, I don't like that word per se, but like maybe a little bit of toxic relationships instead of where you're going to say, hey, I need to take a step back. And the beauty of having then a good friend by your side or your support system, that they recognize that. Like, hey, I see that you're going through this or you're reacting a different way. What's going on?
Yeah.
Makes you reflect on the decisions that you're making maybe in that moment in time where you can be like, oh, you know what? you're right. This is actually not a healthy friendship, relationship, or whatever
Mhm.
you're in. So I really want to call that out because I think it's a really good lesson for everybody that it's okay to try and then also be like, hey, this is not the right fit and let me try something else. And not to be kind of, and Ireland has that a little bit, right? Where everybody is on this sort of campus all together, and then everybody is doing a lot of social things, but also be still yourself. Like, don't
Yeah.
get too much sucked into that culture, even though you can embrace certain things and you will have friends, etc. It's important to have also a little bit of maybe boundaries in that way. What is good,
Mhm.
what is not good, and try out things and go through that. And the other point that I wanted to make as well is if you have friends that are cheering you on, those are the friends that you want to look for advice. Because I remember that, talking about our careers as well, we did a really good job in helping each other finding our goals. How are we going to achieve those goals and just be a cheerleader in our careers?
Absolutely, and some of the things like, I mean, you used to teach me, like, about, like, how to make your goals really clear to your manager or what have you, and, like, we would share things that we were learning. I mean, other things I always keep with me when people that I work with, when I've said something that kind of gets them to take accountability for what's going on. And I always remember you in the back of my head going, and you'll have to say it in Dutch, but the English translation is a cat in a corner, like makes straight jumps.
I did used to say that, yeah, and
Yeah. I always remember that Lara Spronga. But yeah, so I often think of that as well, like almost as a way to calm myself down as well in work situations where someone is like jumping all over the place and I'm like, okay, I've put the cat in the corner.
I think it's also, from a career advice perspective, and I think there's a lot of, counter arguments about who are you going to discuss your career with. I think it's really important that you find the people that cheer you on, but give you honest feedback and realistic goal setting and
Mm,
how to get there. Because I remember and that was quite refreshing for me when we started to have like real career conversations. And I mean, we discussed, for example, my move to the United States. That was at that point still a dream. And we've gone through that entire process. And I think
mhm.
one of the things that I value so much about you is not as a colleague, because at that time we were also working for the same company, or we still work for the same company. But
Yeah, the
we
brief moment where I wasn't.
yeah, where did such a good way of providing feedback as an outsider
Yeah.
and having real feedback in a friendship, I think is super rare. And that was so refreshing for me to have like, oh, I can talk and discuss things about my career and about my goals without feeling kind of the guilt maybe or like, oh, I can't say things or like it was really refreshing to have you by my side during that time and even outside of that time, obviously, but
Yeah.
to went through that entire process of, hey, what is your career? Make you reflect, I think is super valuable in a friendship as
Yeah.
abroad or going through your goals.
And when you're speaking to someone about your career, I think what you're highlighting is that it needs to be someone you trust. It doesn't have to be like, I know sometimes you have to speak to like directors or general managers to make yourself visible to them. But are you necessarily going to take advice from them on your career? Like,
Yeah,
it's still kind of
100%.
it's yourself.
Yeah, I think and that's a really good point actually, because I remember that we were talking to so many people in our organization as well and outside of our organizations as well. But like to have a career conversation, make yourself visible is indeed something different than finding the person that you can take career advice, any type of advice from, right?
Yeah.
You only will have a handful that you fully trust, that know you, that wants the best for you, but give honest kind of like reflection as well. And you can have those inspiring leaders and take the learnings that you want to take from them. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to take everybody's advice. Like you can learn
Yes.
and listen, but it's different than just taking everybody's advice. I think that's a really good way
Right.
of saying that. I know that we're almost about to wrap up here, kids. Time flies, honestly. So I
Yeah.
do two quick or three questions for you. Do you still miss the most about South Africa?
The sun, the fruit, so the mangoes, the avocados, the just all the fruit in all its glory. And my family. Yeah, I miss my family. I'm very close to my family, and I do miss the way South Africans think and talk and debate. Grown to really love the way the Irish think and talk, and just but you can still miss another
Oh,
part.
yeah, 100%. I think it's really important to A, stay connected to what you have because you grew up in that
Yeah,
way and the sense and the culture, etc. So I think it's really good that you A, take that from back home, but also taking the learnings from a different culture. It doesn't mean that you need to forget everything about,
yeah,
South African way because that still makes you you and makes you a very valuable person in that global and international journey that you have. So, yeah, and the fruit. I mean, like, I definitely.
however, I was recently in Egypt and discovered that their mangoes are better than South Africa's mangoes. So
My gosh, yeah, gosh, just
at least it's on the African continent, so I can
yeah,
claim
exactly.
like
Oh, yeah,
bond.
yeah. What do you now love the most about Ireland?
I love so much about this country. It's hard to say. I love the sea and the friends that the sea has brought me and the community the sea's brought me. I love how beautiful this country is. My one friend teases me and says that I only really think it's beautiful like when spring summer's coming in, that I get obsessed with it, and after like 3 months of winter I want a divorce. In truth, I can still recognize, like in January when we drive to the Wicklow Mountains or something, just how absolutely beautiful it is, but not in a loud, showy kind of way. It's not these like massive mountains. It's just green and
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
No,
it really, really is a beautiful country. I think as well, a funny thing that you mentioned is like the loudness. I think Ireland has this maybe in just keeping your words like this silent beauty. Like you can
yeah,
go literally along the coast, find your peace, see the nature, and just be you feel it's a small island, but you feel so small because everything is like this majestic nature that is
yeah,
around you and the history that it has. And just the people and the community, I think, makes Ireland such a unique place to A, live. And if you're not living there, just to go visit because it is extraordinarily beautiful. It
absolutely.
really
And
is.
people's humor is something else here.
That is true. They're a little bit dark.
It's fabulous.
All right, Kens. So with us closing kind of the podcast, if you could leave one thought or feedback or advice for the people that are building their own international journeys right now, what would it be?
Well, I think the theme of our discussion has been around like building your support system and trying to figure out what you need of the support system. And it doesn't have to be like 10 people and their 10 different qualities that you need, but if you can just identify like the qualities you need in one person to start
Yeah,
building your support system and take a chance, ask them to move.
yeah.
Like,
You never know, 5 years later that you will record a podcast together.
yeah.
No, it's lovely. Kent, thank you so much for being part of the podcast, but also to be truly my support system as well, even though that we're not living in the same continent even anymore. But I really value you as a real friend and just to close it off as my housewifey, because I truly miss you as well. And I really, really enjoyed our podcast together where we could do a little bit of reflection on our own friendship and what that was like to build that support system. So I think with those wise words, we're gonna close off the podcast.
Thank you. Loved it.